Jake Morrison sat in the back row of the large classroom, trying not to stand out among his alien classmates. His brown hair and pale skin made him different from everyone else in the room. Around him sat creatures with scales, shells, and skin that glowed in strange colors. Some had 4 arms, others had no arms at all. A few floated in the air inside clear bubbles, filled with purple gas dot. The classroom was part of the biggest university in the galaxy. Students came from hundreds of different worlds to study here. Jake was the first human ever accepted into the advanced biology program. He felt proud, but also alone. None of the other students talked to him much. They whispered in languages he could not understand and looked at him with curious eyes. Dr. Zexthul walked to the front of the room on 6 long legs. His body looked like a giant praying mantis, but his head was more like a spider. 4 thin arms moved as he spoke, and his voice sounded like rocks grinding together. Jake had learned to understand the alien professor's speech over the past few months, but it still made him uncomfortable. "Today we will study a new species," Dr. Zexthul announced. His compound eyes sparkled as he looked around the room. "We will examine the creatures from the 3rd planet of the Sol system." Jake's heart began to beat faster. Sol was the name aliens used for Earth's sun. The professor was going to talk about humans. Jake kept his face calm and picked up his digital notepad to write down what he heard. Large hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a human body floating in the air, slowly turning so everyone could see it from all sides. Jake felt strange watching a projection of his own species being displayed like a museum exhibit. "These beings call themselves humans," the professor continued. "They are one of the most interesting species we have found in recent years. They look simple, but they hide many secrets." The other students leaned forward in their seats. Some made clicking sounds that Jake knew meant they were excited. A student with blue crystal skin raised one of her many arms. "Professor, are these the creatures that have been spreading to other worlds so quickly?" "Yes, excellent question, Kiranel," Dr. Zexthul replied. "Humans have moved from their home world to over 50 other planets in just 100 of their years. This is very unusual behavior for a new species." Jake wrote this down, but felt worried. The way the professor spoke made it sound like human. Expansion was a problem that needed to be solved. The hologram changed to show the inside of a human body. Jake could see the heart, lungs, brain, and other organs glowing in different colors. The professor pointed at each part with one of his thin arms. "Now, let us examine their weaknesses," Dr. Zexthul said. "Unlike most intelligent species, humans have only one heart. If this organ stops working, the entire creature dies within minutes." Several students made notes on their devices. Jake felt his own heart beating harder as he realized what was happening. This was not just a biology lesson. The professor was teaching the class how humans could be killed. "Their breathing system is also very simple," the professor went on. "They need a specific mixture of gases to survive. Change the air around them, and they become helpless very quickly." A student who looked like a walking tree raised a branch. "Professor, what about their bones? Are they strong?" "Another excellent question, Timberwix," the professor answered. "Human bones break easily compared to most species. A fall that would not hurt you or me could kill a human. They are surprisingly fragile creatures." Jake kept writing, but his hands were starting to shake. He looked around the room and saw that every student was paying close attention. They were all learning exactly how to hurt humans, and they seemed very interested in the information. The professor continued his lecture for another hour. He talked about how humans could not see in the dark like most species. He explained that humans needed to eat every few hours or they would become weak. He showed how human skin could be damaged by temperatures that other species found comfortable. The most fascinating weakness, Dr. Zexthul said near the end of class, is their emotional nature. Humans become upset when their family members are hurt. This makes them make bad decisions. You can control a human by threatening the ones they care about. Jake's pen stopped moving. That last comment felt different from the others. It was not just scientific observation. It sounded like tactical advice. The hologram disappeared, and the professor closed his notes. For next week, please read chapters 12 through 15 in your textbook. We will discuss how to identify genetic weaknesses in newly discovered species. Students began packing their things and leaving the classroom. Jake sat still for a moment, thinking about what he had just heard. When most of the room was empty, he walked down to the front where Dr. Zexthul was organizing his materials. Professor, Jake said carefully, I found today's lecture very interesting. I was wondering if you have done much research on human psychology, as well as biology. The professor's head turned toward Jake. His compound eyes seemed to study the young human for a long moment. Ah, Mr. Morrison, I did not realize you were paying such close attention. Yes, I have spent considerable time studying your species. From many angles. I would love to learn more, Jake said, trying to sound like an eager student. Are there other aspects of human behavior that might be important to understand? Dr. Zexthul made a sound that might have been laughter. Your curiosity is admirable, young human. Perhaps you would be interested in staying after class next week. I could share some additional insights that might not be appropriate for the general curriculum. Jake nodded and thanked the professor, then left the classroom. As he walked through the halls of the university, his mind raced with questions. Why was an alien professor so interested in human weaknesses? Why did he want to discuss things that were not appropriate for other students to hear? That night, Jake lay in his small dormitory room staring at the ceiling. Through his window, he could see the lights of the alien city stretching toward the horizon. He felt very far from home and very alone. But more than that, he felt afraid. Something was not right about Dr. Zexthul's interest in humans, and Jake was beginning to suspect that he might be the only person in the galaxy who could figure out what was really going on. Jake spent the next 3 days thinking about Dr. Zexthul's invitation. He went to his other classes and tried to act normal, but his mind kept returning to the strange lecture about human weaknesses. Every time he looked at his alien classmates, he wondered if they were thinking about what they had learned. On the day of his private meeting with the professor, Jake arrived at the biology building early. The halls were quiet because most classes had ended for the day. His footsteps echoed as he walked toward Dr. Zexthul's private laboratory on the top floor. The laboratory door was made of metal that seemed to move like water. Jake knocked, and Sheikand heard the professor's grinding voice tell him to enter. The door flowed open, and Jake stepped inside. The room was much larger than Jake had expected. The walls were covered with glass cases that held specimens from different worlds. Jake saw creatures he had never imagined, floating in glowing liquid or pinned to display boards. In one corner, he noticed several containers that made his stomach feel sick. They held what looked like human organs and tissue samples. Welcome, Mr. Morrison, Dr. Zexthul said from behind a large desk. I am pleased that you accepted my invitation. Please, sit down. Jake sat in a chair that adjusted itself to fit his human body. The professor moved around the desk on his 6 legs and activated a control panel. The lights in the room dimmed, and a new hologram appeared in the center of the space dot this time. The human figure was much more detailed than the one from class. Jake could see every muscle, every blood vessel, every nerve. The image was so realistic, it looked like a real person floating in the air. I hope you don't mind that I am using your species as our subject today, the professor said. I find humans to be particularly fascinating from a biological standpoint. Jake tried to keep his voice steady. Of course not, Professor. I'm here to learn. Dr. Zexthel made that grinding sound again. Excellent. Then let us begin with a more detailed examination of human vulnerabilities. The professor used a pointing device to highlight different parts of the holographic body. In class, we discussed the single heart. But there are many other critical points that can cause rapid system failure. The image zoomed in on the neck area. Jake saw his own throat displayed in perfect detail, with arteries and veins glowing in red and blue. Here, for example, the professor said, pointing at 2 spots on either side of the neck. Apply pressure to these points for 30 seconds, and the human brain stops receiving blood. Unconsciousness occurs almost immediately. Jake felt his own pulse beating in his neck as he watched the demonstration. He forced himself to nod and take notes as if this was normal academic information. The professor continued his lesson for the next hour. He showed Jake pressure points that could cause paralysis, spots where a small cut would cause massive bleeding, and ways to disrupt the human nervous system. Every piece of information was presented as scientific fact, but Jake knew he was learning how to kill members of his own species. Your respiratory system is particularly vulnerable, Dr. Zexthel explained as the hologram focused on human lungs. Most species can survive in a wide range of atmospheric conditions. Humans require a very specific mixture of gases. The professor activated another display that showed different gas combinations. Reduce oxygen below 18%, and humans become confused and weak. Below 16%, they lose consciousness. Introduce certain other gases, and the effect is even more dramatic. Jake swallowed hard. What kind of other gases? Carbon monoxide is especially effective, the professor replied. Humans cannot detect it with their senses, and it binds to their blood cells more easily than oxygen. A small amount in the air, supply, and an entire human population could be eliminated without them ever knowing they were in danger. The casual way the professor discussed mass murder made Jake's hands shake. He pretended to adjust his notepad to hide his reaction. Professor, Jake said carefully, this information seems very specific. Have you had opportunities to test these theories? Dr. Zexthel's compound eyes turned toward Jake. For a moment, the room was completely silent, except for the humming of the equipment. An astute question, Mr. Morrison, the professor finally said. The Galactic University has funded several research expeditions to study human colonies on the frontier worlds. These missions have provided valuable data about human behavior under various conditions. Jake felt cold. What kind of conditions? Isolated populations are ideal for biological research, the professor explained. We can observe how humans react to environmental changes, dietary restrictions, and atmospheric modifications. The subjects are unaware they are being studied, so their responses are completely natural. The professor moved to another display that showed a map of human-settled worlds. Several planets were marked with red symbols. Our next expedition will visit the colony on New Montana, Dr. Zexthel said. It is a small agricultural settlement, perfect for testing some of our more interesting theories about human social breakdown. Under stress, Jake stared at the map. He knew that New Montana had about 50,000 people, including families with children. The professor was talking about experimenting on them like laboratory animals. The beauty of studying a species so thoroughly, the professor continued, is that one learns not just their weaknesses, but how to exploit them most efficiently. Humans have spread across the galaxy very quickly, but their expansion can be controlled if one understands the proper methods. Jake realized that Dr. Zexthel was not just a scientist. He was planning something much worse than research. The professor saw humans as a problem that needed to be solved, and he was developing the tools to solve it permanently. Professor, Jake said, trying to sound impressed rather than horrified, your research could change how the galaxy thinks about species management. Indeed, Dr. Zexthil replied. The Biological Purity Council has taken great interest in my work. They believe that certain species pose threats to galactic stability through their rapid expansion and integration with established cultures. Jake had never heard of the Biological Purity Council, but the name made his stomach turn. When will the new Montana expedition take place? In approximately 6 standard weeks, the professor answered. I had hoped you might be interested in observing the field research. It would be educational for you to see practical applications of theoretical knowledge. Jake nodded enthusiastically while his mind raced. I would be honored to participate. Professor. Excellent, Dr. Zexthil said. I will make the necessary arrangements. You will find it quite illuminating to see your species from a proper scientific perspective. The meeting ended with the professor giving Jake additional reading. Materials about human psychology and social structures. As Jake left the laboratory, he felt sick to his stomach. He had learned far more than he wanted to know, but now he understood the true scope of the threat facing humanity. Walking back to his dormitory through the alien city, Jake realized that he might be the only human in the galaxy who knew what was coming. The question was whether he could find a way to stop it before the expedition to New Montana began. Jake could not sleep that night. He lay in his small bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything Dr. Zexthil had told him. The professor's words kept playing in his mind. Research expeditions, Biological Purity Council, testing theories on human colonies. The next morning, Jake skipped his regular classes and went to the university's main library. The building was enormous, with floors that stretched higher than Jake could see. Information from thousands of worlds was stored here, and students could access almost any database in the galaxy. Jake found a quiet corner on the 15th floor and activated a study terminal. He started by searching for information about the Biological Purity Council. At first, he found nothing. Then he tried different search terms and finally discovered some references in academic papers about genetic research. The papers were written in complex scientific language, but Jake slowly began to understand what he was reading. The Biological Purity Council was a group of scientists from different alien species who believed that some species were dangerous to galactic civilization. They thought that species should stay on their home worlds and not mix with others. Jake found a list of council members. Dr. Zexthil's name was there, along with scientists from 20 other worlds. The council had been meeting for over 10 years, discussing what they called the contamination problem in the galaxy. One paper talked about species that expanded too quickly and adapted too easily to new environments. Jake realized they were talking about humans, even though the paper never used the word human directly. Instead, it referred to aggressive colonization species and genetic integration threats. Jake searched deeper into the university's databases. He found financial records showing that the council had received funding for several biological survey missions over the past 5 years. The destinations matched the locations of human colonies that had gone silent or reported strange illnesses. His hands shook as he read a report about the colony on Kepler Prime. The settlement had been thriving until 18 months ago, when a research team arrived to study atmospheric conditions. Within weeks, the colonists began getting sick. By the time help arrived, most of the population was dead from what doctors called unknown respiratory failure. Jake found similar reports from 3 other human colonies. Each time, a research team had arrived shortly before the disasters began. Each time, the team was led by members of the Biological Purity Council. The pattern was clear. The council was not just studying humans. They were killing them. Jake accessed the communication networks used by university faculty. He had learned how to do this by helping Dr. Zexthil with research over the past few months. The professor had given him access codes without thinking about what Jake might find. In the encrypted message files, Jake discovered the true scope of the conspiracy. The Council had been planning what they called species-specific solutions for several years. They had identified humans as the primary threat to what they called galactic biological order. One message from Dr. Zexthil to another council member made Jake feel sick, as Sol-3 species continues to spread at an alarming rate. They adapt to new environments too quickly and show dangerous tendencies toward genetic mixing with other species. If we do not act soon, they will contaminate the entire galactic gene pool. Another message discussed the development of atmospheric processors that could slowly change the air on human worlds. The changes would be too small for humans to notice at first, but over time, they would make the planets unlivable for human life. Jake found technical specifications for diseases that had been designed to affect only human biology. The Council had spent years studying human genetics to create viruses and bacteria that would be harmless to other species, but deadly to humans. The most frightening discovery was a timeline. The Council planned to begin Phase 1 of their solution within 2 months. Phase 1 involved introducing research stations near major human colonies. These stations would look like scientific outposts, but they were actually weapons platforms designed to release atmospheric toxins and biological agents. Jake read through dozens of messages and technical reports. The Council had thought of everything. They had studied human psychology to predict how humans would react to disasters. They had planned false explanations for the deaths that would make them look like natural disasters or accidents. The new Montana expedition was just the beginning. If it succeeded, the Council would move to larger human settlements. Within 5 years, they planned to eliminate most human colonies in the galaxy. They would leave only a few small populations on isolated worlds where humans could be studied and controlled like animals in a zoo. Jake realized that the Council members truly believed they were saving the galaxy. They saw humans as a disease that would destroy the natural order of space. In their minds, genocide was not murder, but medicine. As Jake read the final set of messages, he discovered something that gave him hope. The Council had been so focused on studying human weaknesses that they had documented their own vulnerabilities as well. Each species in the Council had detailed biological profiles in the university database, including information about their atmospheric needs, genetic weaknesses, and technological dependencies. The aliens had been so busy planning to use human biology against humans that they had forgotten to hide their own biological secrets. Every weapon they planned to use against humanity could potentially be turned back against them. Jake copied all the information he had found onto encrypted storage devices. He now had evidence of the entire conspiracy, including the names of Council members, their planned timeline, and the locations of their secret facilities. But Jake also realized that having the information was not enough. He was one human student on an alien world, surrounded by species that wanted to eliminate his people. He needed help, but he could not trust anyone at the university. For all he knew, other faculty members were part of the conspiracy. Jake thought about the communication system he had used to contact his family when he first arrived at the university. Earth was months away by the fastest ships, but maybe he could send a message to human authorities. The problem was that any message he sent would have to go through alien communication networks. The Council would probably intercept it before it reached human space. He needed a different plan. Jake looked at the timeline again and realized he had very little time. The new Montana expedition was scheduled to begin in less than 6 weeks. If he was going to stop the Council, he would have to do it from here, on their own territory. Jake spent the rest of the day studying the technical specifications for the Council's weapons and research stations. If he could not warn Earth in time, maybe he could find a way to sabotage the Council's plans from the inside. As he left the library that evening, Jake felt the weight of what he had learned. He was carrying the knowledge that could save his species, but he was also carrying the terrible responsibility of being the only one who knew the truth. Walking back to his dormitory, Jake looked up at the alien stars and made a decision. He would not just be a witness to the Council's plans. He would find a way to stop them, even if it meant risking his own life. Humanity deserved a chance to survive, and Jake was going to make sure they got it. Jake knew he had to be very careful. If Dr. Zexthul or the other council members suspected that he knew about their plans, they would probably kill him. He had to pretend to be the same eager student while secretly working against them. The next morning, Jake went to Dr. Zexthul's office with a smile on his face. He knocked on the door and waited for permission to enter. "Mr. Morrison," the professor said, looking up from his work. "What brings you here today?" "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," Jake said. "I'm very excited about the new Montana expedition. I was wondering if there's anything I can do to help prepare for it." Dr. Zexthul's compound eyes seemed to brighten. "Your enthusiasm is admirable. Yes, there are several ways you could assist with the preparation. I need someone to verify the accuracy of our human biological data." This was exactly what Jake had hoped for. "I would be honored to help, Professor." "Excellent. I will give you access to our research databases. You can check our information about human physiology and behavior. Patterns. Since you are human yourself, you can tell us if our data is correct." Jake spent the next few days working in the professor's laboratory, but he was not just checking data. He was secretly changing it. Whenever he found information that could be used to hurt humans, he altered the numbers slightly. He changed temperature ranges that would be deadly to humans, modified the chemical formulas for toxins, and adjusted the atmospheric compositions that would cause breathing problems. The changes were small enough that Dr. Zexthul would not notice them immediately, but they were big enough to make the Council's weapons less effective. If they tried to poison the air on New Montana using Jake's modified data, the toxins would be too weak to kill anyone. While he worked on sabotaging the research, Jake also tried to find a way to contact Earth. The university had a powerful communication system that could send messages across the galaxy, but all transmissions were monitored by alien authorities. Jake needed to find a way to send a message without anyone knowing. One evening, Jake was working late in the laboratory when he discovered something interesting. The university's communication system had an emergency protocol that could send priority messages to any world in the galaxy. These messages were supposed to be used only for major disasters or threats to galactic security. Jake realized that the Council's plan to eliminate humans definitely qualified as a threat to galactic security. He could use the emergency system to send a warning to Earth, and the alien authorities would have to deliver it because of their own protocols. Jake spent hours learning how to use the emergency communication system. He had to be very careful because using it without authorization was a serious crime. But Jake decided that saving his species was worth the risk. Late one night, when the laboratory was empty, Jake activated the emergency system. He composed a message to Captain Lisa Hayes of the Earth Defense Corps, someone he had found in the university's database of human military leaders. The message was simple but urgent. Human colonies under threat from alien conspiracy called biological purity. Council. They plan to eliminate human populations using biological weapons and atmospheric toxins. First target is New Montana colony in 6 weeks. Council members are university professors. They have detailed plans for genocide disguised as research. Need immediate defensive preparations. Evidence attached. Jake attached all the files he had copied from the Council's databases, including their weapon specifications, timeline, and the biological profiles of the alien species involved. Then he sent the message using the emergency priority system. The transmission would take 3 weeks to reach Earth, but it would definitely arrive. Jake felt relieved, knowing that Earth would at least have some warning about what was coming. Over the next few days, Jake continued his work in the laboratory. Dr. Zextel seemed very pleased with Jake's verification of the research data. The professor did not realize that Jake had systematically sabotaged almost every piece of information that could be used against humans. "Your assistance has been invaluable," Dr. Zextel told Jake one afternoon. "Thanks to your work, I am confident that our new Montana mission will be a complete success." Jake smiled and nodded, but inside he felt satisfied. The professor's confidence was based on false information that Jake had planted in the databases. Jake also began studying the alien species profiles he had found in the university files. He learned that Kalahari, like Dr. Zextel, were vulnerable to certain sound frequencies that could disrupt their nervous systems. The crystalline species called lithans to be paralyzed by specific electromagnetic pulses. The floating gas breathers needed their environmental suits to survive, and the suits had several weak points that could be exploited. Jake memorized all of this information, hoping that somehow it could be useful to human defenders. He also learned about the Council's communication systems, their ship designs, and their weapons technology. Everything he learned, he included in follow-up messages to Earth using the emergency system. 2 weeks before the new Montana expedition was scheduled to begin, Dr. Zextel called Jake to his office for a special meeting. "Mr. Morrison," the professor said, "I have wonderful news. The Biological Purity Council has approved your participation in our field research. You will accompany me to New Montana as my personal assistant." Jake felt his heart racing, but he kept his expression calm. "That's incredible, Professor. I'm honored by this opportunity. The council members are very interested in having a human perspective on our work," Dr. Zextel continued. "They believe your presence will help us understand human reactions to our research methods." Jake realized that the council wanted him there to watch his own species be eliminated. They probably thought it would be entertaining or educational to see how a human reacted to witnessing genocide. "When do we leave?" Jake asked. "In 10 days, the professor replied. "We will travel with a full research fleet. This will be the most important biological survey mission in galactic history." Jake thanked the professor and left the office, but his mind was racing with new concerns. If he went to New Montana with the Council's fleet, he would be trapped when the attack began. But if he refused to go, the professors might become suspicious. Jake decided that he had to take the risk. Going to New Montana might be dangerous, but it would also give him a chance to sabotage the Council's plans at the most critical moment. If his messages to Earth had worked, human defenders might be waiting for the Council's arrival. That night, Jake sent one final message to Earth using the emergency system. He told them about his plan to accompany the Council fleet and asked them to be ready for his signal in the attack. Jake looked out his dormitory window at the alien city, lights, and took a deep breath. In 10 days, he would either help save New Montana or die trying. Either way, he would not let the Biological Purity Council succeed in their plan to eliminate humanity. The next phase of Jake's mission was about to begin, and everything would depend on whether the humans of New Montana were ready for what was coming. The Council's fleet was impressive and terrifying. 15 ships of different designs moved through space toward New Montana. Each ship belonged to a different alien species, and each carried weapons designed specifically to eliminate humans. Jake stood on the bridge of Dr. Zextel's command ship, watching the fleet through the main viewing screen. "Beautiful, is it not?" Dr. Zextel said, moving up beside Jake on his 6 legs. 15 different species working together for the good of the galaxy. This is what cooperation looks like, Mr. Morrison. Jake nodded and tried to look impressed. "It's incredible, Professor. How long until we reach New Montana?" 6 hours, the professor replied. The colonists have no idea we are coming. Our ships are using stealth technology, so their sensors cannot detect us. We will arrive, complete our research, and leave before anyone knows what happened. Jake felt sick thinking about the 50,000 people living on New Montana who had no idea they were about to be attacked. But he also felt hopeful. His emergency messages to Earth should have arrived weeks ago. If Captain Hayes had believed his warnings, human defenders might be waiting. Dr. Zexthul activated a holographic display that showed the New Montana system. The planet looked peaceful from space, with green continents and blue oceans. Several small space stations orbited the world, providing communication and transportation services for the colonists. We will begin with atmospheric modification, the professor explained to the other council members on the bridge. Our gas dispensers will release compounds that will make the air difficult for humans to breathe. While they are struggling with respiratory problems, we will introduce biological agents into their water supply. A crystalline alien named Vexstar spoke up. What about the human space stations? Should we destroy them first? No need, Dr. Zexthil replied. The stations are lightly defended and pose no threat to our fleet. We will disable their communications so they cannot call for help, then proceed with the research as planned. Jake listened to the casual discussion of mass murder and forced himself to stay calm. These aliens truly believed they were doing something good for the galaxy. In their minds, eliminating humans was like removing a diseased dot as the fleet approached. New Montana, Jake excused himself and went to a private communication terminal. He sent a coded message using frequencies that Dr. Zexthil had taught him weeks ago. The message was simple: Eagle landing. Begin sunrise protocol. Jake hoped that Captain Hayes would understand the signal. Eagle landing meant the attack fleet had arrived. Sunrise protocol was his code for the human. Counterattack to begin. Jake returned to the bridge just as the fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel. New Montana appeared on the viewing screen, looking exactly as peaceful as before. The alien ships moved into attack formation around the planet. Initiate Phase 1, Dr. Zexthil commanded, but something was wrong. As soon as the alien ships revealed themselves, alarms began sounding throughout the fleet. The viewing screen showed something that made Dr. Zexthil's compound eyes widen in shock. Human warships were rising from behind New Montana's moons. Not just a few ships, but dozens of them. Jake recognized the designs from his database research. These were Earth Defense Corps' vessels, heavily armed and ready for battle. Impossible, Dr. Zexthil whispered. How did they know we were coming? The human ships moved with precision and speed that surprised the alien council members. Within minutes, they had surrounded the alien fleet and were jamming their communications. Jake watched as the first exchange of weapons fire began, but something strange was happening. The human ships seemed to know exactly where to hit each alien vessel to cause maximum damage. The crystalline ship Vexstar was commanding suddenly went dark as electromagnetic pulses disrupted its power systems. The gas-breathing species ships lost their environmental systems when human fighters targeted specific weak points. Dr. Zexthil turned to his tactical officer. How are they doing this? How do they know our ship designs so precisely? Jake realized it was time to reveal the truth. They know because I told them, Professor. The bridge went silent, except for the sounds of battle outside. Every alien on the command deck turned to stare at Jake. What did you say? Dr. Zexthil asked quietly. I said they know because I told them, Jake repeated more loudly. I sent them every piece of information from your databases. Ship designs, weapon specifications, biological vulnerabilities, everything. Dr. Zexthil's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign that he was extremely agitated. That is impossible. You are just a student. You had no access to classified information. Jake smiled for the first time in weeks. You gave me access yourself, Professor. You wanted me to verify your research data, remember? While I was checking your files, I was also copying them and sending them to Earth. A tactical officer reported that 3 more alien ships had been disabled. The human fleet was systematically taking apart the Council's forces, using the aliens' own research against them. But how did you contact Earth? Dr. Zexthal demanded. All communications are monitored. Emergency protocols, Jake explained. I used your own university's emergency communication system. The same system designed to warn the galaxy about threats. I just told them about the biggest threat I could find. Dr. Zexthal stared at Jake in disbelief. You betrayed your own professor. I taught you everything you know about biology and research methods. Jake's expression grew serious. You taught me about biology, Professor, but you made one big mistake. In your research. What mistake? Jake gestured toward the viewing screen, where human ships were boarding disabled alien vessels. You studied humans like we were just specimens in a laboratory. You learned about our weaknesses, but you never understood our strengths. Another alien ship went dark as human Marines took control of its bridge. The Council's perfect plan was falling apart completely. You see, Professor, humans do have weaknesses. We're not as strong as some species, and we can't survive in as many environments. But we have one ability that your research never accounted for. What ability? Dr. Zexthal asked, his voice barely audible. Jake looked directly into the professor's compound eyes. We learn every weakness you identified. We spent months developing defenses against. Every weapon you planned to use, we created countermeasures for. And most importantly, we learned how to turn your own strengths into weaknesses. Captain Hayes's voice came over the communication system, speaking directly to the alien fleet. Attention, Biological Purity Council vessels. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender immediately, or we will disable your ships one by one. Dr. Zexthal looked at the tactical display showing his fleet being systematically defeated. How is this possible? We planned everything perfectly. Jake shook his head. You planned everything from the perspective of predators hunting prey. But you forgot something important about humans, Professor. When we're threatened, we don't just run away. We fight back. And when we fight to win. The last of the Council's ships powered down their weapons and surrendered. Human Marines began boarding the command ship, and Jake could hear their footsteps in the corridors outside the bridge. You have destroyed everything, Dr. Zexthal said bitterly. Years of research, years of planning. Jake nodded. That was the point, Professor. You spent all that time learning how to kill humans. I spent my time learning how to stop you. Captain Hayes entered the bridge with a squad of Marines. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She looked at Jake and smiled. Good work, Mr. Morrison. Your intelligence reports were extremely valuable. Jake felt relief wash over him. Thank you, Captain. What happens to the Council members now? They'll stand trial for conspiracy to commit genocide, Captain Hayes replied. Their own research files will be used as evidence against them. Double quotes. Dr. Zexthal looked at Jake one last time. You are my student. I trusted you. Jake met the professor's gaze without flinching. And I learned from you, Professor. I learned that knowledge can be a weapon. The difference is, I used it to protect my people instead of destroy them. As the aliens were led away in restraints, Jake stood on the bridge looking out at New Montana. The planet was safe, and so were its 50,000 human inhabitants. But more than that, the entire galaxy now knew that humans would not be easy. Pray for anyone who threatened them. The final lesson had been taught, and this time the student had become the teacher.